Maybe? Yep.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public are encouraged to register their name and civic address in advance of the meeting for public comment, found under items 8 and 15 by emailing corporateofficer@summerland.ca. Those who have not registered in advance but wish to provide public comment may call the District of Summerland conference line at 1-877-385-4099 and enter participation access code 7382948 during the live meeting. And before we begin, I'll pass it to the corporate officer to outline. We were supposed to have a public hearing tonight, but it's being postponed.
Thank you. Council, we just wanted to, as you know, earlier, we were asked actually, Anthony, CAO, Director of Development Services, decided and chatted about postponing the public hearing. So the public hearing for 2107 Tate Street is being rescheduled due to the large amount of people that have shown an interest in this particular application. So by rescheduling the public hearing to November the 9th, we are going to set up the public hearing at the Summerland Arena, the banquet hall. The larger facility will better accommodate the interests from the community and those who wish to speak to this application. The larger facility will allow up to 30 members of the public to attend at one time. Council chambers, as we discussed earlier today, is limited to 1 or 2 members of the public at one time, who then would have to exit the room. So due to COVID-19 protocols, we still will continue to register those who wish to attend and or speak at the public hearing on November 9th by emailing the corporate officer at summerland.ca. Correspondence to council and or the registration to speak during the public hearing will continue to be received up until November 9th at 12 p.m. Anybody who has submitted correspondence received to date will be forwarded to the November 9th hearing, and anyone who has registered to speak will remain on the speakers list unless we are notified otherwise. We have sent email messages to all those who had registered to speak, and that was done earlier today at around 4:45 p.m.
Okay, thank you. I apologize to anybody who was hoping to speak tonight. It's something we have to live with in these COVID times. So I guess we'll be amending the agenda and of the regular meeting and taking off item 5.1. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any other late items or there's agenda amendment?
No late items.
Okay, thank you. So could I get a approval of the agenda as amended, please? Councilor Patton, Councilor Barkwell, all in favor? That's carried. Adoption of the minutes for October 13th. Councilor Van Elfen, Councilor Barkwell, all in favor? That's carried. So moving along to the mayor's report. Okay, so we're still waiting for the mail-in ballots to be counted before knowing the final results of the provincial election. However, our mayor has indicated she intends to return to the council table in time for our next council meeting on November 9th. So that means you're stuck with me for one more meeting. The provincial election wasn't the only election held in the past week, and I'd like to congratulate Greg Gabriel on being voted in as the new chief of the Dickman Indian Band. As acting mayor, I sent a letter of congratulations to Mr. Gabriel on behalf of council, saying we look forward to building a strong relationship and working together with him and his council. Last week, I was honored to receive Summerland's first Remembrance Day Poppy from Legion President Mike Brazeau and Summerland Legion Poppy Chairman Doug McKay. Each year around this time, the Legion presents the first Poppy in turn to the Governor General of Canada, then to the Lieutenant Governors of each province, and then to a local official in each municipality. The presentation marks the beginning of the annual Poppy fundraising campaign, and poppies are now currently available for a donation at many of our local businesses. All the money collected from the sale of poppies is used for the care and remembrance of our veterans. Due to the pandemic, there will not be a public ceremony in Memorial Park this November 11th, which means local businesses and organizations won't be purchasing wreaths to be placed at the cenotaph. So it's all the more important that this year we pitch in and donate to the Poppy Fund. The Legion is inviting members of the public to go to Memorial Park on their own time on the 11th, November 11th, to place the poppy on the cenotaph. Last week, I also had the honor to receive, on the behalf of the district, Fortis BC's Efficiency in Action Award in the Public Sector Municipality category. This is the award right here. It's a pretty impressive wooden award. I can just pass that around if you want to take a look at it. This is an annual award that's normally given out at UBCM, I believe, but this year was held as an online event due to COVID. I think it's worth noting that Fortis nominated us for this award. We didn't go out and seek it. We were recognized for our efforts to reduce energy use in municipal buildings, specifically through our level 2 energy audits, replacing aging HVAC equipment with newer, higher efficiency and heat pump options, for upgrading street lights and lighting in the arena to LED, and eliminating the need for hot water when resurfacing the ice in our arena. All these efforts are saving taxpayers over $80,000 a year in energy costs, and are contributing to our efforts to make our municipal operations carbon neutral. As an aside, we've recently taken delivery of a new electric Zamboni. Summerland Arena is the first rink anywhere in the world to use Zamboni's new lithium battery technology on its classic 552 model. By retiring our vintage 1976 Zamboni, we'll be saving about 120 liters of propane per year. Last Thursday, I joined Councillors Carlson, Trainer, Barkwell, and Van Elfen, together with our CAO and other staff, as well as members of the media, for the official opening of the upgraded entrance to the municipal landfill. Improvements include a second scale, a new scale house, separate entrance for recycling, and a high voltage electric perimeter fence around the entire landfill to keep out wildlife. I'd like to thank Environmental Service Manager Candace Pilling and everyone in the Works Department for completing this necessary work on time and on budget. And on a final note, with Halloween coming up this weekend, just a reminder that we follow Dr. Bonnie Henry's advice for children to trick or treat in small groups within their local neighborhood. She also says we need to be sure we hand out treats in a safe manner. We don't want kids digging around in a bowl for candies, so it's better to set out a table, candies out on a table outside your door, or hand the candy out using a hockey stick or a witch's broom or something like that. And with that, just a happy Halloween to Mr. CEO. CEO's report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick update for the community that weren't able to tune into our afternoon meeting. Just a heads up on our upcoming budget sessions. Most important part of the council process every year to get ready for the budget process. We've got 2 budget sessions on our utility budgets and capital budgets. Important dates to put in everyone's calendar are November 17th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and November 18th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Those 2 days we'll be talking about our utility budgets and capital budgets for review with staff and council. So the community are welcome to check out those online. And then looking into January, our operating budget, make sure everyone's aware of our general fund budget, which is coming to council on January 13th to begin the process. So just a heads up to the community on those dates. Keep an eye on the council agendas for more information. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. We now have a public comment opportunity. Is there anybody on the line who'd like to comment? Yes. So the first person who's on could give your name and address and go ahead, please. Anybody on the telephone who'd like to speak? Go ahead, please. I guess they must have hung up if you're.
There's someone on the line, but
Sorry, we're not hearing you. Okay. If anybody's on the telephone, just try and speak. I say call my cell phone. I left it at home. Yeah. Any suggestions?
I just give 2 opportunities for anyone to speak and a few seconds in between, and then we can carry on. And there is a public comment period at the end of the meeting. So.
Could we ask them to send an email if they're having problems?
Oh, certainly, to corporateofficer@summerland.ca.
So if you're on the telephone, you're able to hear us. We can't hear you. So if anybody's trying to speak and can't get through, if you could just send an email to corporate officer@summerland.ca, and we can try and resolve that problem and get you on later in the meeting. So we'll move on to item 9.1, development variance permit. And I'll turn this over to the Director of Development Services.
I'll turn it off to Bobby to start us off.
Okay.
And then I'll.
Thank you very much. So the District of Summerland has received an application for development variance permit 20-029 to vary offsite works required at subdivision for the property at 5010 Croyle Avenue. The applicant. Sorry. The applicant is proposing to vary Schedule C.5, Sections 2.03 fire demand criteria and 2.05 hydraulic network considerations of the District of Summerland's subdivision and development servicing bylaw. If this variance application is successful, the applicant would be relieved of the requirements to upgrade the existing 100 millimeter water main on Croyle Avenue. The subject parcel is situated on the west side of Croyle Avenue and is approximately half an acre in size. The current owner has applied for this development variance permit to facilitate a proposed 3-lot subdivision. The current zoning of the property is RSD2, and the applicants currently have a rezoning application to rezone the property to RSD1, which is being held at third hearing. This low density residential use aligns with the OCP, and properties zoned RSD1 are permitted to construct Type 1 manufactured houses and single detached homes. Schedule C.5, Section 2.03 of the SDS bylaw refers to fire demand criteria. This section of the bylaw states that water distribution systems must be designed to ensure that fire flows as required by the most recent publication by the Fire Underwriter Survey are available for required duration. Notwithstanding the provisions of the Fire Underwriter Survey, fire flows must also not be less than 60 liters per second. Detailed design calculations supporting the amount and duration of the design fire flows must be submitted to the District of Summerland Director of Engineering and Public Works, which is now referred to as Works and Infrastructure. prior to final design. Staff have noted that in the applicant's rezoning comprehensive letter and draft PLA, that fire hydrant 341, which is located at the south property line of the subject parcel on the opposite side of the road, can currently only provide 42 liters per second in its current state. As section 2.03 notes, fire flows must not be less than 60 liters per second. The insufficient fire flows can likely be attributed directly to the existing undersized water main on Croyle Avenue. This assumption can be confirmed by water modeling, which is another one of the applicant's condition of subdivision to properly size the water main. Schedule C.5, section 2.05 of the SDS bylaw refers to hydraulic network considerations. The portion that the applicant is looking to vary is the portion that states the minimum pipe size for all water mains shall be 150 millimeters in diameter. The existing water main on Croyle Avenue is only 100 millimeters in diameter, and an assumption can be made that the future growth and fire demand criteria considerations have likely changed since this area was developed in the 70s. The variable that often governs the available fire flow is the diameter of the water main. Logically, the larger volume that a water main can convey, the greater the flows that are available. In almost any circumstance, a water main diameter less than 150 millimeters will likely not be able to provide 60 liters per second. This is why each of the sections proposed to be varied relate to each other. These sections of the SDS bylaw are in place to provide adequate fire flows to the fire department in order to protect the residents of Summerland. In addition to the requirements of the SDS bylaw and inadequate fire flows, as a condition of subdivision, each lot will need to be provided with a water service to service their eventual dwellings. Although the demand of a domestic water service is minimal, it would be an additional 2 services to a system that is already over capacity, as suggested by the inadequate fire flows. This may not be a concern of the applicants. However, staff recommend not supporting the addition of 2 more water services to a water system that currently does not meet minimum standards. The fire department and building officials have also noted that the proposed lots are located outside of the 10-minute fire response zone and will be subject to spatial separation calculations as per the BC Building Code. The buildings that would potentially be built on these lots may be required to install a fire sprinkler system depending on the proposed building plans. If these sprinklers are required in the residences eventually to be proposed, the additional water demand would be required in addition to the typical domestic water usage. As a result of the requirements and concerns mentioned, the applicant is currently required to upgrade approximately 175 meters of water main from Wharf Street to the hydrant across from the subject parcel, hydrant 341. The size of the water main required is to be confirmed by water modeling at the applicant's cost, but is to be no smaller than 150 millimeters in diameter as specified by Schedule C.5, Section 2.05 of the SDS bylaw. The applicant's rationale included the following points. The proposed subdivision is not intended to sell for profit, and that the applicants are both teachers with 2 kids who simply wish to add 2 lots on the property that they live on. The applicants had engaged Ecora Engineering to supply a rough cost estimate for the water main upgrades. The applicant recalls this amount to be around $150,000, in addition to road widening and servicing costs that are also a condition of subdivision. The applicant feels that this cost is too onerous for them, especially during COVID and one of them being a teacher on call. It is to be noted that late this afternoon, The applicant submitted a slideshow that they're going to present after my presentation, and a new, more accurate estimate was provided at around $138,000. The applicants believe that 3 other properties on Croyle Avenue have subdivision potential, and they believe that the cost for the water main upgrade should be split between all 4 properties. The applicants pointed out that each property on Croyle Avenue could also potentially build a carriage house on the street, effectively doubling the population of Croyle Avenue, and the addition of a carriage house would not trigger these upgrades as a result of building permit. For this reason, the applicants believe that the upgrades are not urgent in nature, so cash in lieu for the work should be accepted by the District of Summerland to satisfy these bylaw requirements. Staff considerations in response to the applicant's rationale include the following points. Although the land is not planned to be sold for profit, staff recognize a deficiency in the water system on Croyle Avenue. Staff recommend that council should not support the increased density and additional services to the system without the upgrades required by the SDS bylaw. Staff explained to the applicants the process of a latecomers agreement, and the applicants do not wish to front the cost of this upgrade, and therefore a latecomer agreement is not on the table for these works. Although the applicant has noted that, in their opinion, 3 other properties on Croyle Avenue have subdivision potential, this has not been confirmed by staff. For this rationale to be viable, the landowners of the properties with subdivision potential would need to apply for subdivision in order to make the district aware of these intentions. There is no mechanism to guarantee that any of the properties with subdivision potential noted by the applicant would actually proceed at any point in time. Therefore, 1/4 of the estimated cost, cash in lieu, that the applicant is proposing would likely go unused unless the district decided to pay for the rest. Lastly, although it is likely that a number of the properties on Croyle Avenue could potentially build a carriage house on their property, no additional demand would be required of the existing water system. The District of Summerland does not supply secondary domestic water services to single properties. Carriage houses are serviced through the same service as the primary residence on the property. And a domestic service can only supply as much water as it can supply, regardless of how much water is being requested on the property owners. Or on the property, sorry. Ultimately, the District of Summerland should not allow these additional services to the system without the upgrades required by the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. Therefore, staff are recommending that the required upgrades be completed at this stage as required by the subdivision and development servicing bylaw. For the safety of the public and fairness to surrounding developers and to maintain a standard of practice, staff recommend that DVP 20-029 be denied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And would the applicant speak now? Is that the...
If council has any questions for staff, we certainly can ask at this time.
Okay. Or do we want to hear from the applicants first?
Or the applicant right away. It's council's wish.
Okay, we can hear from the applicants now. So if you just for the record, you say your name and address.
That's fine. Good evening. Thank you. We are Grant and Angela Evans of 5010 Croyle Avenue. Firstly, we want to thank each of you for your service to our community. We know it's not always an easy task making important decisions for our town, so I just want to say right off the bat, thanks for your service. Thank you also for considering our request. Croyle Avenue is a beautiful street. Sorry, my clicker is not working here.
You just hit the arrow to the right there.
Yeah.
There,
There we go.
there we go. Is that the first one?
I can click them if you just let me know.
Sure, okay, thank you. Corral Avenue is a beautiful street with excellent neighbors, so we plan to build our forever home on one of the lots we develop. We are passionate about creating a positive future for our children and wish to build a home with a low carbon footprint, a zero-skip yard, and electrical infrastructure to allow for 2 electrical vehicle charging stations. However, when we received a review of our rezoning application, we noticed a huge obstacle between us and our dreams. As a condition of our development, the district is requiring that we replace a water main that stretches 175 meters from Wharf Street to the hydrant located across the road from the south end of our property.
We've acquired a Class B estimate from Ecor Engineering, which indicates the cost of the water main upgrade to be approximately $140,000, $138,000. Contrary to the original Development Services staff's provided estimate of $52,500. This is in addition to the expected development costs, which of course we would have to pay, which is for road widening, adding services for 2 extra lots, development cost charges, all the usual personal costs. We're simply local residents living on Croyle Avenue who are trying to undertake a very small subdivision development, and these costs are very onerous to us.
We understand why the current subdivision development services bylaw asks developers to finance the cost of this improvement. However, we are not developing a whole new neighborhood to sell for a profit. We're 2 teachers with 2 kids and a mortgage, trying to create 2 additional lots out of our existing property. Previously, there were 2 other subdivisions on Croyle Avenue. If you can bring that next, one more there, thank you. That were completed after the current SDS bylaw was adopted. Neither of these properties were required to complete this water main upgrade. Staff were unable to find any rationale as to why this was the case.
So if you look at a map of our street, is that the next slide? You'll see there are 3 other half-acre properties that have not yet been subdivided. And because Croyle Avenue is within the urban growth area of the official community plan, we believe that all of these properties will eventually also be rezoned and subdivided, and that the cost of the water pipe should be shared between all 4 of these properties. Current water capacity and supply is meeting the needs of Croyle Avenue, and there's been no evidence provided to us that would mandate the water main be upgraded this time based on the addition of just our simple 2-lot subdivisions. We know that these current neighbors have not applied for subdividing, but we're thinking of the future, and that, for, maybe the next owner or the owner after that is likely, looking at the growth in Trout Creek and the hope for growth in Trout Creek, we're thinking that that is something that should and will happen in the future.
Therefore, we propose, and if we can get our next slide, thank you. One more, I think. One more. Thank you.
There we go.
Therefore, we propose that we pay a quarter of the price of at $34,500. That's a quarter of $140,000 to be held in trust until further development happens on our street. We further propose that the upgrade to the water main be postponed until the time that future developments actually increase the demand. The request for decision document recommends we pay the cost of the water main improvement up front under a latecomers agreement. A latecomers agreement requires future developers to pay back a portion of the cost of the project. It expires after a period of 15 years. In the request for decision document, it is argued, however, that there is no evidence that any of these 3 property owners plan on subdividing in the near future. Therefore, there's no evidence that we would ever recoup any portion of the cost of the water main improvement. We are proposing instead to pay our portion, $34,500, in advance, which would be held in trust by the district, gathering interest, until such time as the project can be completed in the future.
Next slide, please. We suggested a number of alternative options to the various developmental services staff we've worked with. Suggestions to offset the cost and minimize disruption and inconvenience to our neighbors included placing a hydrant partway down the street to fulfill the requirement of hydrant flow to the proposed lots. Which is, you can see in this picture here, we propose placing it, it would still be within 90 meters of our new lots, all of the new lots. We suggested supplying a new line to the hydrant from the flats on Trout Creek. That's the next slide. And that would come through the right-of-way. It's technically a city road between our lot and our neighbors. But they didn't like that idea either. We asked about placing a parallel water main, so that's the next slide. Parallel water main down the west side of the street. Since as part of our expected costs, we have to rip up our side of the street and repave it and widen it anyway. We thought, well, why not see if we could bring the pipe down that side of the street? And that's not as much of an added cost then, because it would only then disrupt 3 neighbors' driveways instead of 6 neighbors' driveways. But none of these options were favorable to development services staff.
Currently, according to development services, every house on our street could theoretically put in a carriage house, effectively doubling the population on the street. Wouldn't doubling the population double the demand on the water system, including the fire hydrant? The request for decision document states that carriage houses create no additional demand for the existing water system because they are serviced through the same service as the primary residence. This would indicate that there is not an urgent need for the work to be completed simply by adding 2 additional homes on the street. This seems a little confusing to us.
I think there was 2 or a couple more. There you go. You can just go right through those. There we go. You can leave this one up. As we mentioned previously, we have fabulous neighbors, and we want to continue this great relationship. We have included in this presentation a copy of a petition signed by many of our neighbors in support of our variance application. Now, we've blurred out their names on this because we know it's going to be put live, so we wanted to protect their privacy, but in the copies that we handed to the council, you have their names and signatures.
We hope to move forward with the project, which supports the following sections of the District of Summerland's OCP. So this project would ensure new development that follows accepted ecological standards and practices that are respectful of ecological values, identify and support effective greenhouse gas reduction initiatives, promote energy conservation and dissemination of renewable energy technologies, as well as some smart growth principles that are in the OCP as well, create diverse housing opportunities.
Because there's 3 different sizes of lot there.
Encourage growth in existing communities, utilize smarter and cheaper infrastructure and green buildings. Go ahead.
We're proud to live in a town that's so environmentally minded. We're excited about the number of initiatives that our district is pursuing to help decrease our carbon footprint. The unprecedented number of electric vehicle charging stations being installed around town, the solar panels on municipal buildings.
And an electric Zamboni?
An electric Zamboni. Never even heard of that. And he's a huge electric car fan. So that's really exciting to us. And Summerland is a community that is leading the way for communities around the province. And we wish to be a part of moving Summerland forward.
Thank you again for your consideration.
You stay up in case there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, any questions of the applicant? Start with the applicant. Questions for staff? Councilor Platt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few. I'll start with my very first one. Hypothetically, this project doesn't go forward. We're sitting at 42 liters per second on a hydrant. It doesn't conform to 60 right now. FUS calculations, as you said yourself, is 60. That's a minimum flow. We're deficient as a municipality. Are we not held liable if there's a fire on that street? To our CAO? If we can't deliver the capacity to fight a fire, the onus is on us. And so that's my first question. My second one is, if there's carriage houses built And new construction requires sprinkling because we're outside of the 10-minute fire response, and I realize you may not be able to answer this question. And the spatial between your carriage house and your single-family dwelling can't double the setback. Now we're looking at sprinkling for the carriage houses, which is going to be an increased demand on this system. And so and my third question, or comment.
You want them to answer those ones first?
No,
Okay.
and no, they can answer all three. My third question being is, it'll come back to me. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's all right. I threw you off.
You did, but that's all right. They can answer.
Okay, let's fire hydrants first.
Maybe have a crack at answering that one first, Your Worship, and then pass it to Brad and Bobby to answer it if I miss anything. But the existing fire flow deficiency, there's obviously a number of deficiencies we have within the entire district. I think this certainly highlights an issue in some of our areas where we do want to see infill, where we do have infrastructure that is deficient. We do have a plan with the requirements that we have within our subdivision bylaw to eventually get to where we should be in this area, in the infill areas and around the downtown. It's just who is responsible to pay for getting to those requirements. We have a lot of efficient systems downtown. We can't accommodate the density that we have under our existing zoning down in some downtown areas, for example, without triggering a developer to pay for those upgrades or the district going in. So at the end of the day, it's a choice. Does the district contribute to these areas? Is it part of our capital plan process and compete with other priorities for the district? Or is it based on our current bylaws, the responsibility of the developer who may or may not, or unfortunately may trigger the upgrade and a significant cost of that in some of these other areas. So there's obviously a number of issues. I don't know, Brad, if there's anything else to add on that.
Yeah, the question of liability itself, if we have it within our plans that we're trying to upgrade our system, and if we have it noted as to where there are deficiencies, I don't think we could be held liable because we have a plan, an asset management plan to try to upgrade the system, and it's be expected we're not going to be able to upgrade every pipe to bring up to current standards at one time. So the first question on liability, I don't think we would be. That's my opinion, and we have chatted with the director of works about that question as well, and that was his opinion as well with regards to the capital plan that we have in place. The second question for sprinkling requirements for carriage homes, yeah, that potentially could be a building code requirement depending on the flow requirements that are needed, and because they're outside the 10-minute fire response zone. That would be something that they would have to look at the building permit stage, and it may limit the amount of carriage homes that could be approved within that subdivision on that basis, given the flow, the current flow restrictions that are within that neighborhood. So it may not be theoretically possible for every home to have a carriage hose on that cul-de-sac.
I remembered my last question. The two lot subdivisions that happened across the street. Do you have a timeline on when those were done?
Mid-2000s.
If I may, Councillor. The first one was 5017 Croyle Avenue and the resulting 5091 Croyle Avenue. I came across these resources this afternoon. So my apologies for not being able to get to you guys earlier. But the first one that I already referenced was January 2005 was when the PLA was issued. And the second one was 5207 Croyle Avenue and the resulting 5203 Croyle Avenue. when the PLA was issued was April 2008.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Van Alphen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can respect the fact that, developers should have to pay a portion of the costs in development. But this afternoon, when we were looking at the presentation on the Giants Head Road project, the Quinpool Road project was referenced. A 4-inch water main that had been corroded for years upon years and down to approximately 2-inch. And the reason that water main was replaced was because of fire flow in that area. There's been a lot of development on Quinpool. Carriage homes, house additions, apartment complex, townhouse complex over the last years. And, so I'm having a bit of difficulty with this, that all the onus is going to be put on one lot, one potential subdivision lot. Quinpool, no one paid for that, but the taxpayers, some of them. So I don't know when we identified we had a fire flow issue, but, I think everyone in Summerland's paid for that. It's not just one developer. So that's where I'm having a bit of difficulty. Maybe somebody can clarify that for me.
I guess if I could put that into a question, perhaps, the way I see it too is it depends, it seems to depend where along, at what point you come along. If you get in there early, you don't have to pay. If you get in there late, you won't have to pay. It's just the person who gets in the middle has to pay. And so where's the fairness in that? How do we ensure fairness so that everybody pays their fair share?
Yeah, through to you, Wish, but I think back to Quinpool, that area, from what I understand, was identified as obviously some medium density development on either side of that road. The fire flow is obviously deficient, the quality of the system's obviously deficient, and that was one of the capital priorities for council and the community as part of the would have been 2019, 2020 budget processes for design and construction. So this area along Royal Avenue is currently not within, I don't believe, any of our capital plans for the next 5-10 year plans, from what I understand, which is part of the problem. It's we will get development applications and proposals for developments in areas that are deficient. Again, it comes back to a choice of where council's priorities are for these infrastructure investments. Does a district invest $150,000 here? Does it invest $150,000 in other areas of the community? So they're the discussions that obviously they're difficult discussions. They're not you're not going to preempt every development. You could invest $200,000 in this street and no one could subdivide. So they're the issues that I guess we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and the budget process is there for council to direct staff. Should council think this is an appropriate investment, but it will compete with other priorities that council may have as well.
Councilor Chair.
I think this is a question for the applicants. For option 3, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so for option 3, you have a new water line going down the west side. Does that mean that you would put a hydrant, I guess, at the northeast corner of your property? Would there be a new hydrant?
Yeah, that's where an additional hydrant would be. When we looked into that option, I don't know if you can hear me in the mic or not.
Yeah.
But when we looked into that option, we were told by utilities that to add a separate water line is not ideal, that they wanted to stick with one single line, which is why that was sort of shot down, that idea.
Although,
Okay.
looking at a map of the utilities today, I noticed the one that went around to the neighbors, that map, on Nixon, there's water lines down both sides of the street. So I don't know if it's obviously not never done because it was done there. Another thing that was pointed out to us when we talked about coming through the Trout, what was that name of it?
Trout Creek Flats.
Trout Creek Flats, which I believe they turned that down because it was coming through private property and they get billed for their water, of course, right? So that makes sense. But one of the engineers told us that actually that would be a more ideal system because it would make a loop. So if, for example, we did bring it down the west side and just created some sort of loop with the hydrant across the street or the water line across the street, that actually does create more water flow somehow. I don't know, I'm not the engineer. But we thought it would save us a little bit of money because we're already having to rip up that side of the street for like half the street because our lot is so long, right?
Okay, so I just have two questions then. The first one is, what was the, did you get a cost for that? Not at all, or?
No.
No, just because we were told that wasn't even on the table,
Okay.
that it wasn't even an option.
Okay, I guess so this question is to staff then. Are there reasons correct then for the, why they were not allowed to do option 3?
Remind me which one's option 3?
Having a water main down the west side just to the corner of their property.
Okay, yeah, that probably answers.
So option 3 is very similar to option 1, and most of the conversation by staff revolved around council's priority of asset management. So for option 3, I'm going to get around to it, okay?
Yeah.
So for option 1, to replace halfway and install a hydrant, was not supported by the fire department because one of the existing hydrant on Croyle Avenue further south would remain insufficient with insufficient flows, and one hydrant halfway up Croyle Avenue closer to the north would provide adequate fire flows. So the fire department did not want to have 2 different hydrants supplying 2 different levels of output. And then the Director of Works and Infrastructure referenced asset management being a council priority and having no desire to have multiple hydrants in the area to maintain and take on the costs of maintaining when the minimum spacing of the existing hydrant is sufficient. So coming back to option 3 is very similar. However, it's an additional water main that the district again has to take ownership of, maintain, and take on all of those costs. So being option 1 and option 3 being so similar, if staff had to choose one, I think we would go with option 1 because there's less assets to take care of and manage. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that does. Thank you.
Councillor Van Elfen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that looping system going through that Crow Creek Flats, would that increase the volume?
As you know from previous applications around looping water mains does increase the available fire flows and other and typical flows through water mains, as well as circulate potentially stagnant water, which is a great thing to have. However, this option 2, as the applicants have mentioned, it is a private water system being owned by a strata. So the district would either have to have some sort of agreement with the strata to connect to that water system, and the water being put through there is metered. So another meter would have to get installed on the backside of the property going onto Croyle Avenue, and then we'd have to work out some sort of deal with finance to work out what the strata is using, and it's simple math, but just something that they're not set up for.
Thank you. Another question. If I could-
Just hang
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Devlin,
Yeah, just to add on, we did have a discussion with the Director of Works on this option as well. And he pointed out that from his perspective that if this was to be considered, it would be our preference that the main going through the strata would become a District of Summerland main and not remain under private ownership, which could create an issue with the strata if we're maintaining a main strata. And as well, it would increase the maintenance costs that we're gonna have to face in the future, because now we're taking over a main that would be previously private. But just to secure the connection, I think his recommendation is that we would retain ownership of it.
Further question, if I may. I'm looking at a map and I'm assuming the red dots I see are fire hydrants.
Mhm.
So on Weldon Avenue, there's no fire hydrants at all?
So, yeah, Weldon shows 0 fire hydrants.
And that has a new subdivision at the end.
How old is that subdivision at the end?
They're still building it.
Still building.
Still building,
So
they've
a couple
been-
years, they start.
So they've been upgrading the entire water line?
Well, this will be something we'll have to investigate further and report back to council on, because it could be something that is missed in our GIS system. You know, you never know. These things do happen with our GIS. The hydrant might not be showing on our system.
Councilor Barlow.
Well, I thought that maybe there was a access there to the other hydrant at Nixon, but I guess maybe not. Still be, I'm not sure what the standard is, but there's a standard, 200 meters between hydrants, is that the?
Hydrant spacing depends on the density of the developments. It is 90 meters for single family densities and 180 meters, I believe, for multifamily. So I believe the 90 meter separation would be.
No more, is that like between hydrants or no further than 90 meters, so 180 between hydrants?
But yeah, it's 90 meters radius of like a buffer.
180 meters. All right, and I was just trying to understand the plan of going through what they call the flats there. Is there a water main in that area on the diagram here that's dirt right now? Yeah, so we go like that. So that has sufficient flow. It's large enough to, after servicing all the new development on the flats, to also service that area.
There is a water main that goes through there, newly constructed. It's not included in the GIS as water main, privately owned water mains and stratas typically wouldn't be included on our mapping. However, the water main itself, being if it was to be looped, would improve fire flows. I'm not sure if the water main by itself would be able to sufficiently provide flows to other properties. That would be something that our water modeling
It doesn't
consultant.
have to be big enough to do it on its own because it's coming from both directions and where the water flow.
Yeah. And if I may also add to option 2, I don't believe that the proposal is to loop the system. I believe the proposal is to put the water main directly into the fire hydrant, if I'm not mistaken, by the applicants. But if the plan was for it to be looped, there would need to be some sort of water treatment on the backside of it in case there's any contamination from the privately owned strata coming out. And further, there needs to be 3 meters separation clearance from sanitary mains to water mains as prescribed by Interior Health. Both of these right-of-ways that the existing sanitary main runs through, which basically follows the red line on the screen, it goes right down the middle of that right-of-way. And being a 6 meter wide right-of-way, that puts the water main on the property line of either the property to the south or into the applicant's properties, requiring further dedication and potentially making one of their lots not feasible. Go ahead.
Just sort of related, can water lines, you must be able to cross sewer lines at some point?
Yeah, that's correct. You can cross sewer lines at points. There are prescriptions in our SDS bylaw that all efforts should be made to cross perpendicular to each other, and the minimum clearance vertically would also need to be maintained. The water main would also need to be wrapped in a type of tape that prevents any sort of sewage contamination to enter the pipe.
And I have one more question. The district's preferred solution, running new water line all the way down to the existing hydrant. Does that also involve tying in new connections for each of the houses along the way?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, okay, so they don't want to consider running a line down the street and then looping it in at the hydrant point?
We did propose that as well, twinning the line.
Because I've seen that done before.
They said no to that as well.
Yeah, if I may. The water line was installed in the 70s and is an undersized water main. And from council's strategic or priorities of asset management, staff decided that twinning the system effectively would not be a preferred option. Thanks for the trainer.
Just as more a comment, a couple of years ago, there was a really big house fire on Woods, just past Stoner and Woods. And I remember there being, I think there was some kind of water flow issue that the fire department had at that time in the area. There's a fire hydrant at the corner of Woods and Wharf and the corner of Stoner and Woods. So I could be wrong, but anyway, that's just a point to think about, is that I'm pretty sure they had issues getting water to put that fire out.
Councillor Vanel.
Thank you. I'm having difficulties. I apologize, but I am having difficulties with this Weldon Avenue. That this map's not showing the fire hydrant could be a mistake with their GIS. That's highly possible. And there's a current subdivision happening at the end of the street that's still in progress. I'd like to know further information on this. Is this developer at the end of the street having to upgrade the water line? What's the water line that's there? Are they responsible, to upgrade it? So at this point in time, I'd like to put a motion on the floor that we table this until we get some further information. I don't want to delay the applicants in any which way, shape, or form, but I just want to know what's going on. If we got one development on one street with 0 fire hydrants, and we're going to have a 2-lot subdivision on the other street, then I'd like to know what I just want to know the fairness of it all. That's all. And I apologize because I don't want to delay you in any way, shape, or form. But I just want to get the information, in front of council if possible.
Could we get that now? Yeah, if I may. If we all have time to do so, I could ask our CAO to turn on the as-built layers of the GIS, which might include a drawing of what is constructed there. There's a fire hydrant there. It's just smaller.
Okay, and the pipe size, 200 millimeter, 150 from a tube. Thank you.
Go ahead.
And what size is their line coming down the street? Because I don't remember them having to rip up all the way down the street to redo the water line.
100 millimeter, 200 millimeter, 150 millimeter.
Multi-size.
Yeah, the one different factor with this cul-de-sac, you see the water main going east-west, it's looped, so it'd be providing probably sufficient flows to do that.
I just like to clarify, so in option one, that would provide the over 60 liter requirement up until that point. But after that point, it would be less than the 60 liter requirement, it would be back to what the current 42 or?
That's correct, but we're only concerned about fire flow, and that's the last fire hydrant on that cul-de-sac, so we would be, like, for the domestic purposes, the flow isn't as much concern, it's more for fire protection reasons.
I guess what I have trouble with is that it's already below standards. And we're asking the applicant to bring it up to standard for the whole street. And it's not acceptable that we just bring, that they can't just bring up to standard to their property line. That's what I kind of have trouble with. I think that would be fair up to the property line, i.e. option one, to expect them to basically subsidize everybody else on the street for something that ought to be done anyway. I don't really see the fairness in that. Councillor Barco.
Well, we can't exacerbate the problem by adding more housing in the area where there already isn't sufficient fire flow, but I think like you, there has to be a certain fairness thing. I would really, I don't want to mandate it, but I would like to see staff seriously reconsider the idea of running a parallel line down to at least the hydrant, maybe further, and looping it, because then it's going to have two benefits. They'll save money because you're not hooking up all those houses, and every time you hook up another house on the line, you got to shut their water off. It's expensive, and we will get the benefit of looping. And I know of other streets where that was the decision in the end, that they did the looping. One line didn't have to reconnect everybody's house along the way, looped it at the end where the fire hydrant was. So it's, I think that, they don't necessarily want another pipe in the ground, but it is also providing a benefit and providing the infill that we like.
Yeah, I guess it's balancing the benefit of looping with the having to have more assets to look after, and I'm not really sure what the cost benefit analysis of all that would be. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, just to clarify on the 20, what we had requested was parallel the line up until the northeast corner of our property, because what that means is it provides adequate flow to the southernmost portion of our newly developed lot.
Because it's within the distance, allowable distance.
Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in agreement with both of you. I think that, but when I look over the proposals, I see that there is an offer on the table that $34,500 be held in trust. I look at this too. We had two lot subdivisions happen that increased the density on that street where, for no better terms, we missed it. And I believe that we have an obligation as a municipality to right our wrongs also, and that we can't hang it on our citizens that are looking at doing a small subdivision. I feel that if the owners would like to invest $34,500 into this, that be incorporated into an upgrade of that main to the existing hydrant so that they do get the 60 liters. We're maintaining the asset management where we only have one pipe in the water or in the ground. We only have the one hydrant there. And I think it's a win-win for both the municipality and for the homeowners. Thank you.
Councilor Bell?
So if that twin line that's being proposed came down to that northeast corner of that lot with another fire hydrant there, and then you went straight across the street and tied into the existing, would that help fire flow on the second fire hydrant down further south?
It is hard to say. It would be confirmed ultimately by water modeling. But likely not. It mostly affects the portion of water main that is contained within the loop, not an extension of typically.
Thank you.
Sorry, just going back to Councilor Patton. Just let me clarify what you were suggesting is that there's an offer on the table. We should accept that offer and basically turn it back to staff to figure out what there's some different options on the table. Let the engineers figure out what the best options might be. Is that
Absolutely.
basically?
Absolutely. I think that it's a very generous offer, and by the looks of the costs already going into the subdivision, they're high, and I think that there's something that can be worked out, that we can see the 60 liters at the existing hydrant, and with the partnership with us.
Okay, so just Councilor Barco, and I'm going to come back to you to propose a motion.
I can't go along with Councillor Patton's proposal there. I think if we're gonna do a subdivision, we gotta deal with, it's our time to deal with the fire flow issue. I don't think that the district could afford to pay the other 2/3 and set that precedent. How far back do you go? There's a zillion houses on that road. Well, not a zillion, but why are you sort of looking at the last two? What about the original subdivision? Was it the last two that pushed them below the threshold? We can't do this everywhere in town. I'd like to go back and also speak to the twinning proposal. And in order to satisfy Public Works a little bit more, I think the parallel line should go to the southeast corner and across and the existing fire hydrant, so we're not stuck with two fire hydrants to maintain. Just one fire hydrant and increased flows for everybody on that street with 20. And the last 2-3 houses on the end, I guess they won't get the benefit of 20. But maybe they get stagnant water, they'll just have to brush their teeth longer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand where Councillor Barco is coming from, but the whole premise on this was the 60 liters per second at the hydrant. As our Director of Development Services already indicated, the domestic water flows aren't an issue. So if we get the minimum 60 liters per second to the hydrant, that is what we're looking at. The other 3 houses towards the end of the block, or the other 4 houses, still will maintain their domestic water flow that, as our Director from Development Services said, is not of concern.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Yeah, how are we going to get but you're still expecting the district to pay for the rest of the cost of getting the flow to the hydrant on that location? Because there's a lot of hydrants in town that don't necessarily have the fire flow requirements. And we can only do it, this is the only way we can get it done.
And I agree, but I don't think that 175 meters of 150 or 6-inch pipe should be borne on one person. Especially when 2 other 2-lot subdivisions in the last 10 years have gone in. And it wasn't called for at that time.
Okay, the third is fair.
I think a third is more than fair.
And then but we wouldn't have it in our budget to pay for the rest of the cost of hooking up the flow.
We are going into budget coming up in the next couple months.
Okay, Councilor Van Alphen, and then I'll ask for somebody for a motion.
It was, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was indicated earlier that, we are, as a district, we can't be necessarily held liable because we know there's a problem and we're working on it, right? And I have to agree with Councilor Patton. I don't think it's fair to put it all on one small development. Like to say, there's been 2 other developments, subdivisions done on that street, and there's potential for some more. So if we took the money, I think it's a generous offer, and we put it into a trust fund, as indicated, as other people possibly want to subdivide, or those houses get sold and someone else has to wants to subdivide, we can deal with it. That's the other way of looking at it. Do we have to do it tomorrow? We know it's an issue that has to be done in the future. It's an issue that had to be done a long time ago, and we haven't done it. So, just a question, I guess. Comment.
Councilor Barco.
If you want to speak to the equity issue, I personally aware of a 3-lot subdivision, 1 lot into 3 like this, the end of a street, and the developer paid for the tweeting of the water line all the way, about the same distance, 150 meters or so or more, because water flows and a fire hydrant were required at the end. So if that developer paid for it, why doesn't this developer pay for it? I understand there's sort of an equity, you're thinking going back to 05 or whenever those ones were split. But at some point in time, you start to catch up with these things, and that's where you got to draw the line.
Mr. Devlin.
This is new because I'm new to the district. This is new information to myself as well. That just some information that council to be aware of as you deliberate. That the current subdivision development servicing bylaw provides an exemption for any subdivisions that are basically creating 1 additional lot. So any 2-lot subdivisions would not be, apply the same requirements as a 3-lot subdivision, and hence the reason why we probably couldn't have taken anything from the previous 2 subdivisions in the property.
Councilor Chang.
Sorry, just on that, maybe I'm not understanding that correctly, then if other properties were to subdivide into 2, then we couldn't take money from them.
That's correct.
So that whole buy-in then that Councilor Patton has proposed wouldn't work. Is that right? Am I understanding that? Because this is a 3-lot subdivision, right?
Exactly.
And so that's why it's triggered this.
That's right.
So if the rest of them are only 2, then they wouldn't have to pay. Is that what you were just saying? Am I making sense?
Unless it was through a latecomer agreement where the third contribution that's being proposed is applied to the other parcels that could be developed. So there would have to be a separate agreement that would go over and above our subdivision and bylaw development bylaw requirements.
Okay, even though they're only dividing into 2 instead of 3?
If the latecomer agreement was a solution that could be worked in, the latecomer agreement would apply a charge at the time of subdivision to those parcels over and above what the subdivision development bylaw requires.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So have you considered it a 2-lot subdivision?
Somebody who wanted to do a 2-lot subdivision probably wouldn't agree to a latecomer agreement, would they? Because they wouldn't be required to have contributed anything, and there would be no advantage. Other than maybe we would say, no, you can't subdivide at all because there isn't sufficient water flows. Would that happen?
If you benefit from a potential upgrade and and you're proposing to develop, you would still be subject to that latecomer agreement regardless, even if they didn't want to pay.
You would have to have signed, you would have to, this would have to be gone out and negotiated at this point. And any one of these people could say, well, I'm not talking to you, and then subdivide in half and not be held for any fees, right?
Through the chair, the latecomer agreement works that basically it's an agreement between us and the current developer right now that we will collect monies on their behalf when a future subdivision comes forward. So people don't have to necessarily agree today. We just need agreement from the current developers that we will seek their additional monies that they're sinking into this infrastructure when they go and subdivide it.
It's a good one. Chair, Madam, I almost called you Madam Mayor. My point is that what would be their obligation, our authority to collect any money from somebody else on the street that wanted to split their properties in half? Just because we've done an agreement with this, I'll call him a developer, but he's not really a developer. There's no authority, nothing in our bylaw that says you have to pay anything for this latecomer.
This doesn't have to be in our bylaw. There is provisions for payment of latecomer charges within the subdivision legislation, just like a DCC payment, and wouldn't necessarily need to be within the SDSS bylaw. It's something that the Local Government Act allows us to collect on behalf of other developers. And that's kind of how the legislation works to allow us to do that. So they would have to pay if there wasn't a latecomer agreement attributable to them.
Even on a 2-lot subdivision?
That's correct.
Okay. You're sure about that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, if I could ask somebody to propose a motion, and then we can discuss that motion. Nobody wants to bring forward a motion? Sure.
Can the homeowner or the landowner just remind me again, which option would you prefer?
The variance application of offering the 34,500
Okay, that was your preferred?
would be
That'd be
the
our
preference.
Okay.
Seems we've come to agreement.
Thanks.
Councilor Barclay.
Well, I'm just, I have what I would like to propose, but I'm not really sure how to, how to word it. When I look at the wording of the existing, or the motion as it's written in the agenda, I'll take a stab at it. And we can either pass it or defeat it or amend it.
Maybe just say what it is you're intending.
Well, my intention is to put forward a proposal that they be given a variance for our, whatever rules that we're hearing this agenda. It's very long and complex. And that a parallel water main tied up, looped to the existing hydrant on Coyle Avenue be sufficient for the development of this property.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
Just for clarification, so is that something like option 3, except for bringing it down further?
Yeah, bring it a little further, tie it into the existing fire hydrant, so there isn't 2 fire hydrants on that street that have to be maintained. It's just double check now. We'll install parallel water main, yeah. So just to carry that one a little bit further than what they proposed, down to the, because it's basically kitty corner to their lot. That fire hydrant. And then it would service their 3 houses, I guess.
So CIO wanted to say something.
Yeah, just if, through Chair, Your Worship, if that's something that council would like staff to investigate, because it's a little different to some of the options that have been brought forward, and so I guess council want to try and come up with a solution to help make these 3-lot subdivision work, is what the sense I'm getting from around the table. So if that's a type of solution that council would like staff to look at, what I'd recommend, as opposed to making a decision on the variance tonight, direct it back to staff based on that type of solution or another one that council may be looking at, so that staff can then work with our engineering department, works and services, and the team and the landowner to see what the impacts of that may be. Because again, we haven't got cost estimates on what the extra portion of pipe may be. And again, the landowner would then be on the hook for that. So if that's the direction of council, then I think direct it back to staff is what I'd recommend, rather than denying the application. And then we can bring it back, because at the end of the day, it'll likely trigger the variance. They will still need to have a variance if there is another solution than what our bylaw allows. So at least we can do a bit of work and have some confidence in the fact that it would work.
I'd like to amend it that council directs staff to investigate and report back on the option 3 with the extended to the existing fire hydrant, and to provide comment on the other options that the proponent has presented.
Is there a second motion? A second, so on the table for discussion.
So I'd like to know, what staff, in a report, what they think of the $34,000 proposal and what they would do with that money, whether they would propose to hold it or contribute it towards work right now, things like that.
Yeah, for me, I don't think we should necessarily prescribe a specific solution. We're not engineers, so we don't really know what we're doing up here in terms of where a fire hydrant ought to go, how to loop this, how to loop that. So I certainly support directing it back to staff and with the indication that we want to work out a solution here and come back to us something that's a little more fair than what the applicant's being faced with right now. Councillor Trainer.
I mentioned this before, and I don't know if it's worthwhile or not, but because there was a fire in the area with the smaller pipes a couple of years ago, maybe it's worthwhile to just ask the fire department what their experience was during that, and how much of an issue it was, just for background information when we're making our decision. That would be helpful. I think that fire was in 2016, 2015.
Yeah, I happened to be driving down that street as that fire broke out. It was like the second person there. I tell you, I've never realized how emotional it is to see the fire department show up. And, if they show up and they don't have the resources to fight fire, it's even more emotional. It's a fire is a scary thing.
Sorry, could I just ask our Director of Corporate Services, she more or less got that motion, if you could read it back to us.
Yes, definitely, Your Worship. So the motion, I believe, that has been discussed is that council defer consideration of the variance application, and that council direct staff to investigate and report back with option number 3 and provide comment on other options the applicant has presented.
Option number 3, including extending the line all the way to the existing fire hydrant, because the option as presented by the proponent only goes to their northern property line.
So option 3 with variances.
Yeah.
Variances to variance.
Yeah.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a difficult one because, like I said before, if it was a 2-lot subdivision, it wouldn't trigger anything. And what we've been proposing at this table for, quite a while, is infill. We encourage infill. But if you go over 2 lots, it's gonna cost you a fortune. If it was a 2-lot subdivision, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So I think there's gotta be a way that we, as a council, get what we want, which is infill and higher density. But how do we work together? And with staff, how can we come up with a solution? And I'm hoping we can get there. Thank you.
It's something that's always, that I've been, my own lot, I've looked at, you know, I could subdivide my lot and I could subdivide three, and I've always looked at that and said, it's not worth putting, 3 lots on this because of all the extra, it's just, I'll just subdivide it in 2. And it's because of so we are really discouraging, these extra lots where we could have. Because people who could decide to subdivide in 3 are kind of going to 2 instead because it's a lot cheaper. Councilor Barco.
Sorry, but did that motion include investigating the latecomer fees?
It did include just investigate other options the applicant has presented.
Okay, so as long as it's understood that latecomer fees would be an option we'd want to consider too.
Councilor,
Just another quick question through the staff. So if this was a 2-lot split with possibility of 2 carriage houses, doesn't trigger any water upgrade.
Not according to our bylaw.
Just rolling it out there.
If I may add to that, this lot specifically that we're speaking to, the exemption section of the SDS bylaw, you need to meet 5 criteria, all 5, in order to be exempt. So this lot specifically does not, it exceeds the total highway frontage abutment, the total highway frontage abutting the subdivision or development is less than 70 meters. It exceeds that in this case. So even if this particular lot subdivided in 2, they would still be required. Just because it's a corner lot on that unconstructed road right of way as well.
we'll need a workshop on this.
It's getting more complicated.
I'm not feeling bad because I'm not a development services expert.
Anyone else? Councilor Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To our CAO, could you please remind me on a latecomer? The latecomer is paid in full by the applicant, and then over a period of time as other developments happen, then the district collects the monies on their behalf?
Correct. So the first person in would pay 100% of the costs, and then up to a maximum of 15 years have the ability to get contributions from any benefiting parties. That's if a private owner contributes upfront. It's a district project. There's no timeline it's a forever cost to the attributable properties.
Man. So in this case, if we went by the figures that the applicants, the Evanses have submitted, and we're looking at, say, $138,000, they would have to pay that up front and then on a wing and a prayer hope that somebody down the street is going to develop to get their monies back within 15 years. Is that kind of
Based on
that is?
it all depends on the time for the adjacent or the benefiting property to come in.
Yeah.
So it's up to those properties that redevelop.
But following up on that, if we did it and we accepted their 35,000, there'd be no time limit on when we could recoup.
Correct. But the council would have to budget the remaining 2/3 or the remaining portion of the project as part of the capital budget process.
Councilor Patton.
So with that being said, Councilor Barkwell, do you still want to explore the latecomers fees if it's the Evanses that have to pay? Or is it more that we look at the 34 and we look at options in regards to latecomers or by the municipality?
I think that everything is everything's open for discussion.
Okay.
Okay, I'll call the question then, if there's no further discussion.
Just need to read them.
Director of Corporate Services, just read that one more time.
Certainly. It's actually fine-tuned it. So that council defer consideration of development variance permit DVP 20-029 at 5010 Croyle Avenue, and that staff be directed to further investigate and report back to council on option number 3 and potential variances, as well as provide comment on other options the applicant has presented.
So I'll call the question, all in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Item 9.2, September 2020 Development Services monthly report. Director of Development Services.
Thank you. This report was done for the month end of September of 2020. As council can see, we provide an update on the number of applications that we have in progress right now in terms of planning and development applications. I'm not going to go through each one, but you can see our applications to date on the second last page here. This past year in 2020, we've seen most of our applications have dropped a little bit from the year before, except for development variance permits. We haven't had a number of variances come forward in 2020 to council for consideration. That's something we think is going to be hopefully rectified with the zoning bylaw update that we brought forward at the last meeting. Construction value for end of September is 27 million, which is actually pretty decent given the current COVID situation we have. If you look at the comparison to previous years, last year was a higher year, but the 3 years prior to that we're above those totals for the same time in September. So construction activity is not slowing down with COVID, so it's a good thing for the district and for those that work in the industry. And that's pretty much it. If there's any questions.
Any questions? If not, so we could bring that forward for information. Councillor Nelson, Councillor Trainer, all in favor? It's carried. There's no bylaws for adoption. Any business arising from closed? No. Any notice of motions from any councillors? Seeing none. Information items. Would anybody like to bring any of the correspondence or committee meetings forward? Nobody ever has any questions. And council reports. Oh, sorry.
Did we?
Round 13 correspondence.
Yeah, correspondence. I just wanted there's some letters in there. Are they going to be addressed specifically by the staff then? Yeah. Okay. That was all I had.
That's good. Okay. So, council reports. Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a lot to report. It's just unfortunate that we don't have a film company doing a Christmas movie right now with the lovely snow. But nothing else to report. Thank you.
Councillor Trainer.
Nothing to report tonight.
Councillor Patton.
Nothing to report.
Councillor Barco.
Just say I enjoyed a tour of our new upscale landfill facilities. Everybody else here?
Good. Okay, so now we've got the public and media comment period. Is there anybody on the line? No, nobody on the line. And so I just need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Patton, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor. And the meeting is adjourned. 7:34.
Well done, Mr. Mayor. There you go.